What's up, everybody? This is Whiskey and the Six. I'm Rob. Today I'm reviewing two whiskeys. The Macallan 12-year-old exclusively matured in sherry oak casks from Jerez, Spain, and its counterpart, the Macallan 12-year-old fine oak. I only have the sample of the fine oak. I went through an entire bottle of the sherry cask, so I have a very good idea of what the sherry cask is all about, but unfortunately I've only tried this about 2 or 3 times, as much as that little bottle could allow. I'm gonna nose and taste the sherry, and nose and taste the fine oak. As you probably guessed from my earlier battle of the double cask, the fine oak, and the single cask, not single cask, but just exclusively European sherry oak, I preferred the double cask. Second place, a very close second place, was the single or the European oak, and then third place was the fine oak. Let's see if that sticks tonight. I think it might, but you never know. And I'm also gonna mark these tonight. So, I don't know if you guys remember, first of all, automatic, identifiable Macallan smell to this. But if you guys remember one of my earlier videos, I talked about overrated, overpriced whiskey, and I did mention the Macallan 12-year-old. At that time, I don't know if it was a bad batch, it was heavily sulfured for whatever reason. Since then, I've had several samples. I went to Arizona and I had a bar pour of it. Then I bought a whole bunch of minis when I was at the liquor store down there, just to have periodically while at the hotel, and it completely changed my mind. It was stunning. Something was obviously wrong with this particular bottle that I had. It was nowhere near as good. My palate probably evolved since then, but not to the point where it would be that drastic. So if you do happen to get a bad batch, I recommend that you try it again, because for about 50 American, you definitely can't go wrong. It's one of the best 12-year-olds you can buy. Oranges, for sure. Chocolate oranges. It's a very Macallan smell. You can tell this one's gonna be sweet. This one won on the nose out of the 3. On the palate, you definitely get that chocolate orange, more to the darker chocolate on the palate than on the nose. It's more of like a milky chocolate. You get a ton of cinnamon, that orangey, almost creamsicle like taste, and then cinnamon dominates on the finish, and it lasts for a while. Still tasting it. These actually have been sitting for about a half hour, so they've had a lot of time to open up, and that's made a big difference with the finish on this one, in my opinion. So a lot more subtle. It definitely improves with being open for a while, but it's a lot more subtle Macallan notes on the nose. And that's because this one in particular has one of the barrels being bourbon, ex-bourbon casks. It's still got the same as the double cask with the European sherry and the American sherry casks, but it also has ex-bourbon barrels that it's aged in. So you definitely get a different note. I would say like a grassy, minty note coming from those bourbon barrels. Probably second fill if I had to guess, but they could be first fill. The intrigue about the Macallan Fine Oak 12 is that it's very difficult to come by. A lot of Americans have trouble finding it. It's nowhere in Canada. And from what I've seen, it's mainly on European websites and Asian websites. So it's difficult to come by for sure, and that's what I think the main attraction to it is. The regular sherry cask destroys this one on the nose, in my opinion. So you definitely get that bourbon influence. Like I said, there is a bit of like a mintiness to it. Still get that orange sherry, but there's a lot more bitterness to this one. Still a very nice palate. Not overly complicated, but nice. One more time with the regular, and then I'm gonna go back to the fine oak and give them both a mark. Yeah, the nose just is incredible on this one. So much more mouth coating. You get a ton of that sherry influence. Jerez Spain has some of the, or Macallan just in general has some of the nicest sherry casks in the world. And they own the cooperage in Jerez, Spain, and they fill it with their own sherry. They let the sherry completely evaporate in the barrels, which means that wood is soaking up all of that sherry wine. And you can tell by the product. It's just, time has been very generous to this stuff, and completely natural color on both of these, which, if you ask me, they're not that far off. This is a slightly darker one, but not incredibly darker. There's a big difference on the palate though. Fine oak, listen, it does its job. There are people that really enjoy bourbon aged or ex-bourbon cask whiskey. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it's nice when it's blended in with a heavy sherry influence in the Scotch. Bourbon on its own, on the other hand, I love. I just feel that something's lost in translation, obviously, when you use those barrels for Scotch. I think Scotch almost is meant to be sherry cask influence. There's a lot of people that disagree, so that's just one man's opinion. But for me, not being biased because of that idea, this is still an A-. If I like had to go by my tastes, it's probably a B-. I wouldn't buy it, but I know that because it's got that bourbon influence and a lot of people like it, it checks all the boxes other than it not being, it's chill filtered. Okay, so it's bottled at 40% and it's chill filtered, but it's still natural color, so that's a box there, and it's got the flavor that a lot of people do like. This one, on the other hand, it's bottled at 43% and it's natural color, also chill filtered, but the flavor is just phenomenal. And the cinnamon finish, especially if you're a big cinnamon fan, you're gonna love this one. That's an A, borderline, really close to an A+. It's an 88 for me, the regular sherry. So that one would be an A-, probably an 80 if I had to give it a grade. And that's give or take 5 marks, because I would probably give it a B if I had to be completely honest on my preference. But because it checks a lot of boxes and it's doing exactly what it's meant to do, I can't penalize the whiskey for it not being in my preference. So it's an A-, like I said, probably an 80. This one is an 88, borderline 89. Okay, 88 and a half. Really, really nice stuff. Okay, hope you like this video. If you do, check out my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm also on Patreon. Cheers, guys.